The second year under Kliff Kingsbury was pretty disastrous. They win the first half of their games, and people were thinking, oh, they're finally going to make their first playoff appearance in almost forever. But then they go on to lose the other half of their games in 2020 to go 8-8 and forfeit the last NFC playoff spot to the Chicago Bears. And, during that stretch in 2020, the biggest problems the Cardinals faced was Kliff Kingsbury, their head coach, his inability to adapt to in-game situations, especially when it came to changing up his play calls when the team was trailing and losing. So, also, Kyle Murray also eventually got figured out late in the season. Considering how he's a mobile quarterback and he likes to run around the pocket a lot. Yeah, all the defenses had to do was collapse the pocket, contain him really quick, and limit his chances to get the ball out. So, Cardinals pretty much got figured out late in the season, and they didn't really adapt to what the defense were doing. So, during the offseason, the Cardinals, they couldn't really do much, and they didn't do much because of the limited money they had to spend. And they also lost some of the key contributors, like Patrick Peterson and Hassan Reddick on defense. And they also lost their longtime receiver in Larry Fitzgerald. They also added the likes, though, to counter some of those losses with A.J. Green, J.J. Watt, and James Conner. They also added a center in Rodney Hudson. So, they lost some people, but they also gained some people. The thing was, though, they didn't really have much depth. They didn't really have much reserves or like backups just in case something happened to the starters. So for Arizona, expectations were kind of middling at best because of not just the lack of depth at certain positions, but considering last season's disastrous end, yeah, that's why expectations were kind of middling. But, it was still a wide open NFC West, pretty competitive. So they were hopeful to seize the opportunity. And, surprisingly, they did so early on because they got off to a 7-0 start. And this wasn't a fluky undefeated streak like other teams had to start the season. The Cardinals actually ended up beating teams that eventually made the playoffs, and they did so from the very beginning. The offense playing at a high level, especially from Kyler Murray, looking like an early MVP frontrunner. The receiving core of AJ Green, DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, and then their rookie, Rondale Moore, looked like a deadly foursome. It was like they were good route runners, like made some pretty nice catches, and they were pretty hard to stop after the catch. So the defense was able to contain the opposing quarterbacks, get some big stops on third down as well as fourth down situations. So all in all, the Cardinals looked like they were going to be in full gear to not just get back into the postseason, but perhaps make a deep playoff run and be perhaps an X Factor Super Bowl contender. But hold the brakes. Hold the damn brakes. Nah. Guess who said, nope, not today, Maggle. Not today, Michael. The Green Bay Packers in week 8 were like, nope, we're shutting this gig down, partner. On a Thursday night, the Green Bay Packers went to Arizona and pretty much lit up the gas brakes. They made the Cardinals lose their first games. The offense was pretty much a no-show for most of the game. And yeah, AJ Green sold that game away by not looking at Kyler Murray, who threw the ball towards him, and Rasul Douglas easily picked that thing off. And the Cardinals lost that game and lost their first game of the season. Now, sure, they bounced back from that game with a 2-1 stretch. But the thing is, during that stretch, you see the cracks begin to form. During that Packers game, Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins got injured with ankle and hamstring injuries, respectively. J.J. Watt was already lost for the regular season with a shoulder injury and had to get surgery. And then you had guys like Chase Edmonds and Rodney Hudson miss games with injuries that I don't remember. Now, surely, their backups managed to beat a more healthier 49ers team and a somewhat healthy Seahawks team. But, it was apparent that the lack of depth and full health would eventually damage the team down the stretch. And that stretch indeed did damage the Cardinals yet again. So even with Murray and Hopkins back in the lineup, the Cardinals went on another choke job. Murray was again contained in the pocket, by opposing defenses and, well, was sacked even more than last season's collapse. The defense let up more big plays and wasn't able to get as much pressure as during their undefeated start. And once again, Kliff Kingsbury, during games, failed to adjust his game plan when his team was trailing. And I think in a few games, he let up leads in games. So the Cardinals eventually lost their grip on the NFC West to the LA Rams, and deservedly so, when they lost to the Detroit Lions of all teams. So they clinched their playoff spot. They got some help from the Rams, ironically, by the Rams beating the Minnesota Vikings late in the season. And of course, the Rams, during that wild card game to close out Super Wild Card Weekend, whooped their candy asses in that game. So overall, this season collapse was perhaps even worse for Arizona because, they get off this surprising 7-0 start. They looked like an X Factor Super Bowl contender. They looked unstoppable with that offense that had all these weapons with Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, and then you had a running back in James Conner that was resurging. But then they lost their first game, and then they got all the injuries, and then eventually in December they got their people healthy. They completely took off their gas pedal yet again, and look what happened when they got to the playoffs in that Monday night playoff game. They got embarrassed, really embarrassed. Now I was surprised that the front office didn't fire Kliff Kingsbury for this even worse choke job. Now, what's going to happen if he does it yet again for the third season in a row in 2022? So, going into this offseason, they have a lot of questions to ask themselves. What's the secondary going to be like? What are the options behind DeAndre Hopkins and Rondale Moore? Why does Kliff Kingsbury still have a job? When you think about it, the Cardinals had a lot of short-term deals and not of long-term options at certain skill positions, and a lot of it may have had to do with the tight money they had. But either way, not good for the Arizona Cardinals in what could be a still tight NFC West. So going into this free agency period, they were in the red. They had minus 800,000, so not that bad of red, but still, they were still in the red to open up free agency. So some of the key free agents include AJ Green, Chandler Jones, who they lost, Chase Edmonds, who they also lost, and Christian Kirk, who they also lost. So they pretty much lost most of their key free agents, but they did manage to get back Zach Ertz and James Conner. So at least have some pieces back in the offense, but you have to go back and try to address the big losses that you had in the offseason. So right now you still have about $7 million to spend after restructuring some contracts, releasing some players. You're slated to draft at number 23. So some things you still have to do is get younger at the receiver position. So right now as it stands, sure, DeAndre Hopkins is your number one receiver, but after he didn't really have much of a healthy season in 2021, who knows if he'll have a fully healthy one in 2022. So the Cardinals should invest in at least a second or third receiver option until Rondale Moore takes a leap into that second top receiver role. They have to look into at least a maybe a day 1 or day 2 pick in the draft to find a solid option for Kyle Murray to throw to, because the Cardinals did lose a key piece in Christian Kirk, who got overpaid by the Jaguars, by the way. And they also have to find the best available edge rusher in the draft. I imagine they probably do this in round 1. Because they lost the heart and soul of the pass rush in Chandler Jones. And, J.J. Watt's not getting older, and their linebacker pick from 2021 in Zaven Collins, he was kind of a disappointment in his rookie year. So that first pick should be focused on getting the right guy who's a good edge rusher. I mean, sure, like it's gonna be hard to replicate what Chandler Jones did for that pass rush, but you gotta get some success somewhere. So you also have to get some help in the secondary. There was not a lot of depth in that area. So, and as a result, they got burned late in the season. They still have some options in the free agent market. And if they don't find anything, there's still some solid day 2 and perhaps maybe even a little bit of some steals in day 3 of the draft. So the Cardinals, they had a chance to make a deep run in the NFC. But again, just like in 2020, complacency from Kliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray wasted what could have been yet another promising season. And, considering what they're doing right now in the offseason, and who knows what 2022 could look like. It could be another successful start that leads to another choke job, or they could be sitting with Pete Carroll in the Seattle Seahawks in the basement of the NFC West. But either way, this past season for the Arizona Cardinals was yet another choke job for Kyler Murray and Kliff Kingsbury, and that is a massive fail.